Welcome to today's show. Today we have Mr. Azran Osman-Rani. He was famous for being the ex-group COO and CEO of iFlix Malaysia. He was also the previous Chief Executive Officer of AirAsia. So we have a big shot here, and today we are going to really get as much AirAsiaX, yes, and get as much information as possible out of Azran, because this guy is, he's an embodiment of success, embodiment of being a true leader, and embodiment of a true entrepreneur. So now he has a company by the name of Naluri, and very interesting because you were a corporate leader and now you come out, you have this company right now. Can you maybe talk a little bit about what gave you the decision to make the jump?
Sure. First of all, I don't think I've got lots of successes. I think I just make more mistakes than most people, and I just keep going. But even though you might think I have a very varied career, right, working in big companies, but actually most of my career over the last 17 years has been about building new businesses, right? Whether it was new media businesses, a new airline, internet TV, and now healthcare. And all of them have a common set of characteristics. The first is I try to challenge the existing status quo. So not to come up with a business model that already exists, but to look at an existing industry and say, why are things being done like this? Can we make it completely different? And specifically, how do we cater to the mass market segment in emerging markets like Southeast Asia, where access is an issue, affordability is an issue, convenience is an issue. That's what we did with the airline, right? Before this, long-haul airline was only premium carriers. We had to figure out how do you create from scratch a low-cost model of long-haul. Same thing with internet television, right? Before you had to you pay 100 ringgit a month for a set-top box and channels in a satellite TV subscription. How do we make it much more accessible and affordable to the mass market, and even more convenient without being able to watch anything you want wherever you want? And so Naluri with digital healthcare is along the same premise. And specifically, the thing that I latched on, for example, is mental health, right? It's a big problem. Most of us don't want to talk about it. And it's a problem where even if you know you need help, today in Malaysia, over 7 million people need help. But as a whole country, our capacity to help is very limited. We only have 200 plus practicing psychologists in the country, only 400 plus practicing psychiatrists in the country, right? And so if you take the traditional model, we have to see someone face to face. Or even if you use telemedicine, have like a Zoom call the way we're having right now, that means when I talk to you, I can't talk to anyone else. So I've got finite capacity as one practicing psychologist, and normally one person can serve 40 to 50 clients a month. We want to use technology to take that one same professional and help over 500 clients a month. Because if you increase the range by 10 times, you can make the price 10 times cheaper and becomes more affordable. Because the reality in Malaysia today, if you go to a public hospital, you have to wait 9 to 12 months. How are you going to get better if every therapy session is only 9 to 12 months apart? But if you're willing to pay 300 ringgit an hour, no problem. You go to all the private centers. But that's only like our top 5% of our country who can afford that, right?
Right.
That's
this is where I feel like, Azran, I need to ask you before we jump even further into this, because mental health, we're in Malaysia right now, and mental health is one of those things that where a lot of people don't consider it to be that important, right? That's why when you say I'm going to see a psychologist to actually get some counseling, they think that you're going crazy. They think that you're trying to commit suicide, right? Why pick this market? I'm very curious, because there's so many other market that you can explore and you can go really deep into. Why mental health?
I like hard problems. Think about it. It's actually not a niche problem, right? Today, mental health alone, suicide, for example, kills more people in Malaysia than all of wars, terrorism, and murders combined, right? And even when you look at things like diabetes and heart disease and cancer, mental health ranks even higher than cancer in terms of its seriousness and the cost to the country. So it's a very big problem. And because of the stigma, people don't want to talk about it. But that is why digital is interesting, because digital means I don't have to be seen to go out and reach for help. I can download an app in the privacy of my bedroom and reach out and get help, and not be seen to be appearing weak. right? But actually, getting mental health help is the same thing as I've got diabetes, I've got heart disease, I need to get help, right? So it's the same exact thing. And in fact, the biological process of mental health is the same thing as the biological process of chronic conditions.
Right. So now this new company that you have, Naluri, I would consider it a brand new company. So obviously you have a lot of lessons learned during your tenure with AirAsiaX, with iFlix. Right. What are the lessons that you were able to bring from those huge positions, huge stressful jobs that you're able to learn, and then you bring into this Naluri company right now?
Okay. So the first is, when we first started iFlix, 115 investors rejected us. Because they said, you guys in Kuala Lumpur, there's already a global giant called Netflix. You don't stand a chance, right? And if any entrepreneur out there hasn't been rejected over 100 times, you're not trying hard enough, right? You got to go through over 100 plus rejections. Now, luckily, we eventually did get funded. We scaled, and we could show that even in 2 to 3 years, iFlix scaled to over 20 countries, 20 million customers. Why? Because as great a product as Netflix is in the market, globally, it's a very upmarket product, right? It's for English-speaking people. You got credit cards, Western shows and all that. Whereas for iFlix, it was a lot more localized, and the demographics are very different. Even payment channels are different. Even technology platform is different, right? Because our focus is how do we make streaming work when the bandwidth is 600 kilobits per second, right? Instead of ultra high def on a big flat screen TV. And similarly, when it comes to Naluri, my lesson was, okay, on one hand, the model that I'm trying to do is not radically new. There are proven models in digital therapeutics that have come out of the US, but they're nowhere near as dominant in our space as Netflix was. So there's definitely an opportunity. And the part of healthcare that we focus on behavior change, you must localize, local language, local culture, local context, right? And so that's important. The second lesson is, when we first started iFlix, we thought, okay, let's charge 10 ringgit a month. You can pay by credit card or online banking or various other payments, charged to your prepaid phone bill. Hardly anybody wanted to pay, right? So the entire business plan collapsed. Now, what we ultimately were able to build that business on is to say, well, the retail consumer wants to watch, they just don't want to pay for iFlix. So who benefits when retail consumers watch iFlix? The telcos, because they need more data usage. And video is the most data intensive application, right? 70% of our internet bandwidth is video. So the more more you can encourage people to use video, and long form video will use more than these short, like 1 minute, 2 minute YouTube type videos, right? That's why telcos eventually bought iFlix subscriptions to give to their customers. So similarly with health, right? If you ask the average man on the street, would you like to pay so that you become mentally healthier and not have diabetes and heart disease later when you're older? People go, no, thank you. I'd rather buy Starbucks. But who really feels the financial pressure when Malaysians are unhealthy? It's the employers and the insurance companies, because they are seeing their medical bills going up by like 15% every single year. So they need to invest to get people healthier. So the same B2B2C model of iFlix, we now apply to Naluri, where 95% of our work is with corporate clients, the employers and the insurance companies who feel the financial pressure when their employees or policyholders are not well.
So I think it's really interesting that the way you approach business now is you're looking at, in a way that, hey, instead of going direct, how can I work with another person or another company that already has a huge amount of database, huge amount of people they're already reaching, and just tap into the current, the network that they have. And this reminds me a lot when Rolls-Royce was actually advertising their cars. Instead of advertising on TV and targeting people that will most likely not buy their cars, what they were very smart was that they actually advertised in country clubs and golf clubs. And a lot of people that play golf, they want to drive a Rolls-Royce. So I think it's a very similar lesson that you are able to implement here, which is interesting. But let's talk about lesson that you get from AirAsiaX. I think that's a very interesting journey there, because it's a fast-growing company, and you were there when it was just all the way up. So I want to know what the biggest lesson you learned that could be applicable to a startup, to a brand new company.
Sure. I think probably there were so many things, but the one thing over and over and over again was nothing goes according to plan. Right? Because every single year we had one crisis and one disaster, whether it is the global financial crisis of 2008, 2009, volcanic eruptions in 2010, Japanese earthquakes in 2011, Christchurch earthquakes in 2012, changes in government regulations, airline disasters in 2014. You name it, we had to deal with it. And so every single business plan we put together was thrown out of the window within 1 or 2 months because the external environment changes so fast. And so the one lesson I learned is it's not about trying to have the best plan, because whatever plan you come up with, boom, circumstances are going to change in a way that you just simply cannot foresee. Therefore, we have to build businesses, we have to build teams that can adjust faster than the competition. So it's not about trying to predict. I don't try to say, what are we going to do 12 months from now? I'm very clear what I'm going to do 30 days, but beyond 30 days, I need to be very, very flexible to completely change. And that's probably the number one lesson from that.
That's really interesting, because you're talking about adaptability now, about how people are supposed to adapt really quickly. Like right now, as we're recording this, technically we're still in what we call MCO, which is a lockdown. And a lot of businesses are closing down. I don't know if you drive around. I like to drive around commercial centers because I'm fascinated by businesses. And many of them are not even opening right now. And some restaurant owners that I know, they're telling me that I don't think we're ever open again. And some beauty businesses, some service-based businesses, they're literally telling me, Desmond, we are super affected by this situation right now, which goes back to your point. Adaptability is very, very important. But how do you get your management team, get your entire, squad, right? Get ready to be adapted to the, the crisis that's coming quickly. Because some people, they don't adapt quickly. Some people say, our companies, my team, they take about 3-4 months to adapt. And by the time it's already too late. So how do you do it so quickly? What's the secret?
Well, so first of all, let's try to cover a few points. The first thing is the danger of a crisis as a leader is we try to say, I need to make decisions fast and act fast. That's actually a danger, because oftentimes in trying to make a decision fast, we revert back to what we're familiar with and what we know from our past. But unfortunately, all of our past experiences is not going to apply into a new world, right? And so the first thing we're going to say is, I have to start with, I don't know. So how can I find out more? How do I get my team members to contribute ideas? A lot of people in today's environment just say, okay, you do this, like trying to just act because they want to appear to be in control. But actually, their vision is actually very narrow because they're just telling people what to do. And so your team members I just wait for boss to tell me what to do now. So that's danger number one. The second part is the frequency of getting together. In this MCO period, our team actually has our Zoom calls twice a day at 9 a.m. and 5:45 p.m., right? So 9 a.m. to 9:15, just 15 minutes. Guys, what's the priority for this, for today? And then at the end, look, what happened? What do we need to change? How do we get ready for tomorrow? That level of frequency, right? And then every single week, we stop. We stop because we say, look, okay, what's going on, right? What have we heard from market, from customers, competition? What are we going to change for next week? Every week, forcing ourselves to try one new thing. Because the best ideas don't come from trying to think and come up with the best ideas. The best idea actually is because you come up with 20 bad ideas, finally number 21 is a good idea. So you just have to keep trying, right? And so you got to force the rhythm of every single week you tell your team, okay, let's try one new thing and learn. And if there's one third thing for me, right, is the danger of a crisis period is we're so focused on executing in the short term. Because I've got to meet payroll at the end of May, I only just focus on my short-term stuff. And our brains, when we focus on short-term, it stops to think about the longer-term part, right? Like what happens post COVID-19, right? Where suddenly everyone could walk in. But life will not just go back to normal, right? We can see there are fundamental things that change with supply chain, with payment channels, right? With the way we communicate with customers, maybe less ground events, right? More online events. So how do we allocate time? For example, in my case, even if it's just 2 hours a week, but I put it in my calendar, whether it's to say 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. on Friday night, I stop all my day-to-day tasks and I just try to think 12 months out, 24 months out, how can things change? So that even if you allocate a little bit of time, your brain is working in a different way, right? And you have to focus just on that long term, which is separate from how am I going to get cash for May payroll.
I think that's really interesting. I was watching an interview, I think a year ago. Warren Buffett was with Bill Gates. I think they were being interviewed on stage. There was the interviewer who was there. He asked Warren Buffett, "Hey, I would like to see your schedule. Like, what's your schedule like?" And he took out his like little pocket book off his blazer. He said, "Oh, look, it's all empty." And the interviewer was asking, like, "Why is it all empty? Like, you're one of the wealthiest person on the planet. Why is it empty?" "Oh, empty means I'm using this time to think." And right now, a lot of people are actually attacking him. If you go into stock trading forums and financial instrument forums, everyone is saying Warren Buffett is not doing anything. Warren Buffett should be trading, and Warren Buffett is letting off all the airline shares. But the thing is, maybe he's doing something through thinking. Most people think doing means you actually have to like be physically typing something or telling people to do something. Yeah. But doing is also a process of actually growing a business or making decision as well, which is why it's so important. Now, I want to follow up this with something really crucial because, being busy is one thing. A lot of entrepreneurs, they're very busy. They're going everywhere. They say that I'm very busy. My schedule is full. I'm sure for you being a position of an operating officer, executive officer, if there's one person that's going to be the busiest in a whole entire company, that's going to be you. So how do you handle your time when you were with iFlix, when you were with AirAsia, or maybe even now Naluri? Which one was the busiest? And then how do you handle your time?
Well, I think right now, going through what we are going through right now, this is definitely the busiest part, right? Mm-hmm. But that is why deliberately compartmentalizing time is crucial. And so even, right now, at least I'm allowed to run outdoors. But for the first 6 weeks, we were trapped inside our house, right? And so I got to figure out, how do I do my daily workouts at home? Now, luckily, I've got my indoor bicycle trainer, so most of it was on my bike. But I've got to make sure I start my day with exercise so it invigorates me, right? Mm-hmm. And likewise, I said, like, okay, there's time of day when I need to talk to people and get feedback. That time of days, I got to focus on short-term ideas and then time to think about longer-term stuff. So like really compartmentalizing time. So do you schedule time just to think? Is that what you do? Yeah, but there are different types of thinking. It's not like open thinking type, but it's like, okay, this period I got to think about people. Do I have the right people? Do I have the right skills? This period I got to think about short-term cash generation or cost savings. This period is about the longer-term ideas, right? Because the worst thing for me is when people try to multitask. Because multitask, when you try to do multiple things, right? Let's say I'm talking to you right now on this webinar, maybe I'm answering WhatsApp messages or email. That is the worst thing, because actually the brain does not multitask. The brain does things, say 10 seconds I do this, and 5 seconds I do that. And every time you switch, you're actually exerting mental stress. And therefore you become more fatigued. And when you become more fatigued, you become less creative, right? So busy doesn't mean trying to do 10 things at once, right? Busy means, okay, for this half hour, I only do this one thing. For this half hour, I do that. Like, so it's blocks. So that in each block, you focus on one thing. Right. That's really interesting. Now, I would like to go further. And, I think if you're talking to a room of entrepreneurs or talking to a room of aspiring entrepreneurs, people who want to start a business like you did, I think a lot of people are going to ask you a few very important questions. I think one of the most common questions they'll ask you is about funding. It's not a very popular question, but it's what question that everyone wants to know and everyone wants to get more ideas on, especially right now where funding is a lot more difficult as private investors become a lot more scared about putting money into companies and startups now. So you have experience with that, because earlier you were talking about you talking to 156 investors before one actually accepted the offer. So talk about it. How can we raise fund right now if you want to like start a new business or we want to grow our business? What are the strategies that we can do? Is bank an option, or do we go private investor route? What's your opinion on this? Well, so for the very first time in startup history, we never did it in iFlix. We never did it in Naluri before. I'm also applying for debt for the first time, right? Because we just have to try things that we never tried before. But I'm not counting on it, because I know, look, we don't have positive operating cash flow. We don't have collateral. So traditional debt financing may not be attractive, but I'm going to just try it anyway. honestly, like the successful funding round that we did now, most people think, wow, you managed to raise during COVID-19. But actually, this was like 2 years worth of work, right? The people who eventually invested in this round, we were pitching to them in 2018 and they were rejecting us then. But we kept in touch, right? So that as they see us, they hear about our monthly progress or our quarterly updates, so they kind of know us. Because the reality is, these things are still very relationship driven, right? If you now want to go to a stranger who doesn't know you and say, hey, pitch to me, no one's going to pitch to you, because because then you're trying to just rely on a business plan. And we know business plans are unreliable, right?
Yeah.
And so what they need to see is, are you the kind of person that I trust? And trust can't be built overnight. So if you haven't built a relationship with investors, by all means start now, but you have to be prepared that it'll probably take you 12 months to raise them, right? Now, 1 out of 100 people, maybe they might be able to raise, in 1 or 2 months, somehow they can raise money from an unknown person, but that will be rare. That's like 1 out of 100, right? But for most of us, it is the hard work of building relationships. Once you only come to you need to build relationships before you need money, right? So if you're already needing money, it's too late. Because
I think it's so interesting because there is a business saying, I can't remember how it was sound, but I'll just try it anyway. They were saying that when you need money, banks will not talk to you, but when you don't need money, banks will talk to you.
Yeah.
And I thought it's so interesting because it really is like that, right? Especially right now. I know the government is trying to help as much as possible with the stimulus package, but a lot of small businesses, they are unable to get the loan quick enough, and they have already closed down because of that particular period that they have to wait. And so I think fundraising is really an important skill that I think business owners and business operators must have, no matter who you are, because you never know when crises like this will happen. Who would have thought that there would be a crisis that will not allow you to go out of the house? Who would have thought that? Who would have thought that retail would die so quickly? But really, I think everyone needs to learn how to do fundraising. And your point about building rapport, building a relationship is very, very important. But let's say we have a young entrepreneur, 21-year-old, just got off the college, inspired by you, inspired by people that are extremely successful. They want to be, let's say, the next you, or they want to be the next Patrick Grove, right? So they want to raise their first fund. Where should they start? I know we need to build a relationship, but where?
I think the industry has changed. No one gives money for business plans or PowerPoint presentations anymore, not even a government grant, right? So you got to be able to build the product first, and you got to be able to show I can monetize it before raising money, right? So you can't go to a private investor or VC unless you have like a rich uncle or parent. Then that's maybe one route, right? But the other thing, very, very important, right, is can you build it? Because it's not about idea, right? Nobody cares about any idea. You can't sell an idea anymore. You got to show I can build it, right? And if your idea is give me money and then I hire engineers, boom, we're going to rule you out. Because it's not about paying for engineers. You got to be able to build it yourself, right? That means in your co-founding team, you must have good people who can build the product, right? And the last thing is, why are you the right person to build this particular product? Like why you, right? What kind of industry domain knowledge or experience that you will be the right person to build this? Even if you have the engineer or even you've got the idea, why you? I think these are the key things that investors will ask, right? And so, for me, if you want to really start thinking about it, you got to address these 3 things first, right? You got to build it, you got to have the ability to build it, and you have to be clear why you are the right person to build it first.
That's really interesting. Now that we talk about this, you're really talking about a minimum viable product. How do we create something so simple, makes a little bit of money, goes to an investor, say, hey, listen, we have something so simple and we're able to make money off it. Imagine if we have something a little bit more sophisticated. Right? But we will need money to build a sophisticated version of this. And then we put it out in a bigger marketplace and be able to actually grow it even further. Now, I read that you are actually, you went to Stanford University. That's a very interesting. Yeah, but you were there during the whole Silicon Valley growth phase, right? Would you say so?
Even before that.
Is that the right time? Before that?
Before Yahoo, before Google.
Right. So I just want to know, like, what do you think is why do you think like startups in that particular area, like it's so, like people are just so, it's kind of like a Hollywood if you want to be an actress, you go to Hollywood. If you want to be a entrepreneur, you'll go in a tech space, you will go to Silicon Valley. I know Malaysia is trying to do something very similar with Cyberjaya, they actually organize a lot of events just to cultivate this. But how come Malaysia is not there yet? What do you think is missing? Like, if you are in charge of this, what would be one or two things that you can, magically make it happen?
First of all, Silicon Valley is not an overnight success. It goes back even before the 1950s, right? Like companies like HP and all that, who started at Stanford in those old days, to semiconductors in the 1970s, right? Before software finally came in the 1990s. So that whole ecosystem was built over decades, right? So if you only have 1 or 2 decades, you're not going to be ready for it, right? I think the third part is there's this self-fulfilling cycle. Once you have successful entrepreneurs who've exited, and then they plow that back in, right? They become VCs, or they start up other investments and all that, right? So a lot of companies, it's self-reinforcing, because the only way to make it sustainable is it can't just keep coming from like government grants or VC money. Like, entrepreneurs have to be the primary engine of recycling that money, right? So exits and then going back to start new businesses or fund new entrepreneurs. And so we have not reached that stage because we don't have a critical number of entrepreneurs who have successfully exited. Right?
So that's really interesting. So really, you're talking about, all this is really an ecosystem. Like it's sort of like, successful people come back and plow back the money, which I thought was quite interesting. Now, which I want to lead to this interesting question, because I just read the news literally before we jump on this call. I don't know if you know, Tesla, Elon Musk, according to the news, he forced the factory to open up, even though they're not supposed to be in operation right now. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts about it? Because he's in a very difficult situation. His factory cannot be closing all the time because, when you're closing, they already have problems with making the dates for the cars. So right now they are forced to open, and he said, if you want to arrest someone, arrest me first. Well, now, what's your thought on it? He's a very successful figure from the Silicon Valley. He's a very successful figure when it comes to entrepreneurship. What's your thought of him going out there telling the world, telling the media, you want to arrest me, but I'm opening my factory no matter what? What's your thought from the entrepreneurship perspective?
I honestly, I don't know enough about his situation, and it would be very unfair for me to just simply critique other people, right?
Yep.
For me, again, what I've learned is I shouldn't be the ones having all the answers, right? Like it needs to be something that our team decides. So for example, in our case, even when the restrictions were released, i.e. we could go back to the office, right?
Yeah.
I'm interested to go back to the office because I love the office, right? But my team members said no, right? We're going to be 100% remote from work. So to me, I think we have to be more humble in saying we don't have all the answers. So how do we, get the people that matter? Like for me, it's like you the boss might want to open, but do your employees, are they ready or not, right? Or some might say, yes, in principle, but how are you going to protect me? Right? And so you've got to be able to convince your employees to say, we feel safe in this environment, then we can do it.
So what I like about the way you set it up is your employees have says, and I think that's very important. I feel like that's very democratic. I feel like it's not just about you, and you're letting based on the short conversation that we had so far, I feel like you're one of those bosses that actually give your employees a lot of power. You trust them. Hey, listen, I'm going to assign you to do this, and I trust you entirely with this, and you're going to do it. Like, how do you cultivate the trust with employees? Because I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs, small businesses. They always tell me, Desmond, I wish it's that easy. I just don't trust my employees. I just don't trust my people. What gave you that trust? How did you develop it?
Well, so first of all, right, we have to first recognize that if you're in that situation, the fault is not the employee, the fault is you, the boss, right? Either because you made a wrong hiring decision, so you did not hire properly, or you did not train and develop them properly, right? So we have to start with the premise that whatever it is, the buck stops with me. I am the problem. I've got to fix it, right? Simply pushing it to say, oh, my employee is not good enough, doesn't work, right? Now, for example, one technique may be in a time like this where your employee might not be doing as much as you think they should, right? Maybe because they don't have self-confidence, right? Two options, right? One, you can say, why this, why this? Like you just start to be even more angry. And as bosses, we need to remember, how would we feel if we had a boss and the boss is telling us like that, right? Like just kind of pointing our mistakes and all that. Versus, imagine if your boss says, I know you don't think you can do it, but it looks like I have more faith in you than you have in yourself because I think you can, right? Like a different approach. It's still saying you're not performing enough, but instead of just scolding you, which makes the employee even more smaller and even less likely to be self-driven and self-motivated because you've just killed whatever small sense of self-worth that they have, find a way of uplifting them. Even when you want them to do more because you're not happy with your produce, you know, there are different approaches that I think people should. Another tip, be careful of why versus how. A lot of times when our employees are not performing, we say, why did you do that, right? Why did this happen, right? Like finding blame versus saying, hey guys, that didn't work. How can we avoid this from happening again, right? How can we? That means I'm also responsible as the boss. You guys tell me what can we do to learn as an organization, right? So that's a much better way of dealing with the big problems that happen than just like wanting to point blame. Because when you point blame, how does your team get better?
Right. I think it's really important that you behave like a mentor to your own team as well, because chances are people that are working in your office and people that are working in a company, they never seek a mentor and they've never thought about getting a coach, right? And I think in the position of power, a position of leader, it's very important to actually motivate them instead of reduce their self-esteem. You should be actually improving their self-esteem and self-worth, just like exactly as you said. I'm a big believer in using that idea and strategy to actually improve the team and improve their productivity as well. So I want to end today's podcast with a very important question here. Like literally, I think this is going to be a tough question, but I don't know if you can deal with it. But you have been AirAsiaX CEO, you've been through a lot. So I think this is going to be a perfect question for you. It's crisis times now. Right. Small businesses are not doing so well. They're closing down. How would you advise a company like AirAsiaX now, a tourism company now, or a hotel company now? What would you tell them to do? These are the companies that are badly affected by the crisis, and they didn't ask for this, right? Every single day I'm reading the news, hotels are being closed down. If you are placed in a position to help these companies, what would you advise them?
Well, again, I have to qualify myself because it's been over 5 years since I left. Sometimes interesting is when you're really big, right? Other people will also be hurt if you simply fail. Right? And you've got to use that to your advantage, which is why, for example, there are bankruptcy or restructuring rules, right? Like now is the time where you've got to go back to everyone to say, look, we're all in this together. Whether banks, you need to restructure my loans because I can't pay you for the next 12 months. To employees, what can we do? And when it comes to employees, you got to start with yourself first. Even at Nullary, we had to do pay cuts to save jobs, but I said, okay, let me start with me. I take zero salary, me and my co-founder. Our management team will take between 20 to 50% off so that every junior person, they don't have to take a cut. Because for them, even if you take 10% off, they will really feel it, right? So we protect the junior guys first. That's how you earn the respect of your team. That's how you earn. Therefore, if you go to a bank, if you go to your business partners, they will always ask, well, what are you doing first? Right? If you want me to give you extended credit and all that, what are you doing? Right? So we've got to show this is the stuff I'm doing. I need everyone to pull together. And there were a couple of periods while I was at AirAsiaX where we ran out of money, completely ran out of money, right? And I had to beg shareholders, I had to restructure aircraft financing loans, I had to go back to suppliers and negotiate supply. You got to do everything. And everyone will look at you to say, well, what are you doing first, right? If you just say, well, maybe as a boss, I take a 10% pay cut, and then you expect the bank to give you a 12-month moratorium, that doesn't make sense, right? So you've got to lead first with yourself and then bring everybody else together.
I like that. I think a lot of business owners, especially small ones, they need to understand that it's time not to be selfish. It's time to play as a whole, play as a team. Really, business is a team game. It's not an individual game. You're working with a team of people trying to accomplish same mission and same goal. Well, Azran, it's been a pleasure having you. I've learned so much out of this 35 minutes, recording with you. It's like having a business teacher just pumping in MBA knowledge into my mind, which is fantastic. Thank you so much. I know a lot of people are going to benefit from this. If anyone want to find out more about you, maybe they want to reach out to you, they want to follow your work, articles or blogs or anything. Do you have anything like that?
Sure. I'm definitely active on LinkedIn, on Instagram, Facebook, or if you want to download the Nullery app, you can even chat with me because I'm also on the Nullery app on executive coaching, which everybody can try for free. Yeah.
Amazing. I'm sure they can learn a lot from the articles that you put out and posts that you put up too. Thank you so much, Azran. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.